In this week's Technique Tuesday video, I'll demonstrate how to do the tubular bind-off for flat knitting. As always, if you'd like to jump right to a specific point in the video, there are direct links down in the description. So this sweater is an example of one where I have used a tubular bind-off. I have knit one, purl one ribbing on the button bands and the neck band, and as well as the sleeve cuffs, and all of these were worked toward the edge and then bound off using a tubular bind-off. What you'll see with a tubular bind-off is that the columns of knit stitches just wrap around to the other face of the fabric, becoming the knit columns on the other side. So there's no distinct edge that is completely different than the stitches. The stitches just wrap around. With this swatch, I'm about to do the tubular bind-off, and what you'll see is that I did the tubular cast on to start out the swatch, and it has the same qualities as the bind-off. The knit stitches just roll around from one face of the fabric to the other. So the tubular bind-off is a type of sewn bind-off, which means that you need to cut a long tail and thread that tail onto a yarn needle. The first thing you need to do is cut that tail. So I typically use a tail that's about 4 times as long as the item I'm grafting or binding off is wide. Now I said grafting for a good reason, and that's because this bind-off method is also known as the Kitchener bind-off or the grafted bind-off, and you'll see why in just a second. Now there are a couple of different ways of doing this bind-off. I prefer to separate the stitches so that all the knit stitches are on one needle and all of the purl stitches are on another needle. Now you can do that by holding 2 needles in your right hand and then passing a knit stitch onto one needle and then pass the purl stitch onto the next, and keep alternating like that. If you want to be as safe as possible, you can do that. I tend to not do that because I find it tedious and kind of futzy. So what I just do is I just pull the needle out, and what you'll see now is that the knit stitches are all coming forward and the purl stitches are all leaning to the back, and that makes it really easy to transfer the stitches then onto separate needles. So I take one needle and I just run it through all of the stitches, all of the knit stitches. And then I take another needle and I run it through all of the purl stitches. So I'm going to bind off a flat piece of knit one, purl one ribbing. And to do that, we have a setup that we do that's just like if we were setting up for grafting. And that is that we enter the first stitch on the front needle as if to purl, and we leave that stitch on the needle. So we call that purl on. We pull the yarn through. And on the back needle, where there's a purl stitch, we're going to knit on. I'm just giving a gentle tug when I get the yarn all the way through. That's the setup. The setup is complete. From now on, we're going to work in pairs of stitches off the front needle and then the back needle. So when we're working in pairs, the first stitch on the knit needle, these are all knit stitches, so we knit off. So we insert as if to knit, let it come off the needle, rotate our yarn needle, and then insert as if to purl through the second stitch. And give that gentle tug. Now on the purl stitches on the back needle, we purl off the first stitch, enter as if to purl, let it come off the needle, then enter as if to knit, but leave it on the needle. And again, I give a gentle tug. So we're going to keep repeating this. On the front needle where the knit stitches are, we knit off, rotate our needle, purl on. And notice I'm not pulling the yarn through until I've entered that second stitch. This helps keep me on track so that I know that I've done both maneuvers through both stitches. So that way I can see where the yarn is attached. If I'm interrupted, I can see I've ended on a front needle so that it's now time to work a back needle. So on the purl stitches, I purl off and knit on. And again, I wait until I've entered that second stitch before I pull the yarn through, and then I tug gently. Knit off, purl on. Purl off, knit on. For the last 2 stitches, it's similar to the setup, but I knit off and then I purl off, and then I can pull the yarn through. The setup and completion of the tubular bind-off in the round is slightly different than for knitting flat. I'll be demonstrating the tubular bind-off in the round sometime in the near future. If you find my videos helpful, you can thank me by buying me a coffee on Ko-fi.com. If you have any comments or questions about today's video or suggestions for videos you'd like to see in the future, you can leave those down in the comments below or join the discussion in my Ravelry group, Rocks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.